In the interest of time, I'm going to get us kicked off here. People will continue to join. I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion today. So welcome, everybody. My name is Megan Milcharek. If we have not met before, I am the head of education and assessment, or the head of customer experience for Enflux here. And my role is acting as a subject matter expert and working with our customers to ensure that they're able to use our dashboards and leverage really the insights we're able to bring. But today, it's really not about me. It's about my two panelists who are here with me, these two absolute rock stars, Dr. Erinne Kennedy and Dr. Catherine Cohn, who are joining us today to talk about curricular revision, starting a new curriculum, and revising a new curriculum. Information, this is a panel discussion, so I'm going to shut up soon and let our panelists really bring the insights. For you, there's a question and answer available in the chat here. Make sure that you just are looking at who you're sending it to. Is it going to the host and the panelists? Is it going to everyone, or is it going to one specific panelist? If you send it to me, I'm the host, or if you send it to everyone, then everybody else can see the question that you have as well. I'm hoping for a robust discussion from all of you. I see some really awesome people in this session today. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Erinne Kennedy. She is the Assistant Dean of Curriculum and Integrated Learning at Kansas City University College of Dental Medicine. Dr. Kennedy is one of the founding 5 female members of the program in Joplin, which is an awesome team to have. She has an incredible background in public health dentistry and the whole wellness of clinicians and students. Erinne, I was reading an interview you did recently where you talked about your experiences with mental health when going through dental school. And man, that was a really awesome interview that you gave. So really considering not just the academic needs of our students, but the entire student as they're going through our programs. She graduated from The Ohio State University. We didn't have the there. The Ohio State University and Nova Southeastern University's College of Dental Medicine. She had a general practice residency through the VA and earned a board certification in public health dentistry and a master's in medical science. Do I have that right? Master's in medical science and dental education from the Harvard School of Dental Medicine, where I believe you were the first student to graduate from that program. So Dr. Kennedy is bringing some awesome experience and from all over the country. She is an expert spokesperson for the American Dental Association as well. So thank you, Dr. Kennedy, for being with us today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. And then we also have Dr. Catherine Cohn from the Touro College of Pharmacy. Dr. Cohn completed her pharmacy residency at the VA, so there's something you have in common. You both have Veterans Administration experience, but in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She's worked as an ambulatory care specialist with prescriptive authority and as the residency program director. When she joined academia, she left that job in 2007 and joined us here in the academy. Dr. Cohn has coordinated and taught skills labs courses where simulation was her focus for integrated learning. And in 2015, she transitioned to a new role in assessment. She joined all of us people in assessment as the assistant dean and then continued coordinating and teaching in those skills labs. And then in 2022, she joined Touro as the associate dean for assessment. However, right now, she is currently the interim dean for Touro University's College of Pharmacy. So Dr. Cohn is bringing a wealth of administrative experience along with that curricular experience here. And her research has been focused on the scholarship of teaching and learning with an interest in higher order thinking, curricular design, and EDI practices. And then fun little fact, Dr. Cohn and I have published together, although she did the heavy lift and I was just somewhere along the bottom of the authors, but we've known each other for a while. So I'm super happy you're here with us today, Catherine. All right, so first question right off the bat, what was the biggest challenge, Catherine, for you in changing a curriculum, but first, Erinne, for you in starting a curriculum, a brand new curriculum, brand new program?
You know, it's great to be here with you all today. Dr. Cohn, it's so fabulous to be speaking alongside of you guys. I think in starting a curriculum, there's 2 things. How are you innovative and how do you measure that? And 2, you have a blank canvas. So what does it look like to declutter what everyone else has cluttered already so that you have an example of what contemporary education looks like? I think in starting a curriculum, that's one of the biggest asks. If you've been at an institution, let's say for 100 years, there's a lot of clutter in the curriculum. It takes a long time to contemporize a curriculum that's been in movement for that many years. So at new schools, as educators, we look to those new schools as pilot programs for what does it look like to do the things that's really challenging to do in an existing program. And along the way, you want to make sure that you can track that and use data to make those decisions. And so specifically when it comes to mapping programmatic competencies, that's one of the ways that we use our influx curriculum map, is like we attempted to declutter that. We wanted to have a more contemporary, fully integrated curriculum across our biomedical and clinical sciences. And then we try to find software that can allow us to track that and measure it, so that we can provide data to our colleagues about, okay, we attempted to do this and this is where we're at now. We still do certain things analog. You know, we have curriculum maps that are in Influx because we want to map very specific topics and images. But for the most part, I think that's one of the greatest challenges, is how do you innovate and measure it? And more importantly, what does it look like to do the decluttering and build from that blank canvas and really have something that you can showcase?
Yeah, that's great. So you're saying you might have some naysayers out there who are like, I don't want to do this risky thing. It's not what we do in dental ed. But if you can prove that it worked and it was measurable, so much the better. And
Yeah,
then Catherine, for
absolutely.
you, changing.
So I came into the program and it was a 4-year program. So a traditional 4-year program. However, non-traditional in that it was the only 2 and 2. So 2 years didactic, 2 years of clinical pharmacy education in the country. So they already had sort of like an innovative way of thinking there. So that was one hurdle I didn't have to cross. Like, how do you go from 3 years of didactics down to 2 years of didactics for an accelerated curriculum? And I think, that was lucky that we didn't have to address that particular issue because it was already a 2 and 2. But I imagine that that would be a huge hurdle for any college of pharmacy or any program that was going from like a 4-year to a 3-year. I know that the place I previously worked at had a dental program that was going from a 4-year traditional to a 3-year accelerated. And that was a huge, big issue for them. So that's definitely an issue that we escaped by, luckily in our program. But we still had to gather consensus. And that is like something that no matter what, if you're changing a curriculum, you have to do. So we got together what we called a curricular change task force. And it was really individuals that were excited because they knew we needed to make the change and were willing to work towards making that change. And they came from the science as well as the practice department. And we met weekly. We also had things that we had to do like in the meantime in between. And I have to tell you, I think we maybe did our change faster than anybody in the country. We had a consultant come in and help us. And she mentioned that she didn't think that she'd ever seen a program change as quickly as we did. But then again, I go back to the fact that we were already a 2 and 2. So we didn't have to cut a whole bunch of curriculum, and that piece was not there. So, which I think would take a considerable amount of time. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying like you looked for your faculty and your staff who were just really like, this is a problem. We want to speed things up. We want to make sure that, the curriculum is working correctly. So you really had to know who you had in your program and what they wanted to see in the curriculum. Which sounds like you were rather in tune with the heartbeat of the program.
Yeah, so I came in with experience. I had been in a 4-year program and also a 3-year program. So I kind of had an idea about what direction we needed to go. And we also, like I said, hired a person to come in and be a consultant with us to just kind of go through the barriers that they had seen in the past as well as you're changing the curriculum.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Great.
All right. Okay, so Catherine, we'll stay with you. Clinical and didactic education. So you went from 2 years of clinical down to 1 year of clinical, which sounds like that would be a challenge. But how did you make sure you didn't lose anything and that it blended with your didactic curriculum?
So what we did is we put in these like OSCEs, and we called them Appiness Readiness Assessments, Appiness Readiness Assessments, ARA. And we looked to see what were the most difficult issues that our experiential preceptors had told us our students struggled with as they went out onto rotation from our curriculum. And we put those into our competencies. Also, of course, considering what the competencies are for pharmacy and the EPAs. But We especially looked to see what our experiential preceptors had come back to us as issues for our students. So then we made OSCEs surrounding those particular issues so that we could assess them as they go through our curriculum, both in the first and second year, to make sure that they have the skills necessary before they go out on their APPEs. And we don't let them go on their APPEs unless they pass those. So we remediate them until we feel that they are ready to go out on their experiential rotations.
Wow. So you really are looking at the data super
We really
regularly
look at
and
it.
at the student level.
Yep.
Wow. That's
And
impressive.
those are tied to our competencies because we are a competency-based curriculum.
Absolutely. And so then for you, Dr. Kennedy, I know dental ed does things completely differently, right? Like you have a live clinic working all the time, don't you,
Yeah.
on your campus? So how do you bring that in and consider the didactic curriculum and that clinical practice, ensuring students aren't getting too much of either?
What's interesting is that we actually approach it very similarly to the way pharmacy is approaching it with Dr. Combe. I was writing notes as you were talking, and there's 3 ways that we do that. One, at the end of every term, we go through a robust curriculum review, just like everyone does. Our course directors fill out some forms. They look at course evaluation data, student achievement data. They actually then present that to we call it an academic advance in our College of Dental Medicine, and they get feedback from every single staff, faculty, and administrator on their course. The combined feedback then goes through our curriculum management committee and our curriculum management process in the college, and that is voted on by our university curriculum management committee. So we have a pretty robust review process, and that allows us to innovate, declutter, blend in a lot of ways, right? But there are 3 things that we've done. One, it allows us to use data to drive how much sim time's needed. So during our first year, we actually found out students weren't getting enough sim time. And I just wrote this using our influx data the other day for an accreditation document. And we did a couple things. One, we added extra sim time. We hired more tutors. And we also redesigned 2 clinical courses in our first year to allow for more experiential learning. And we added time to that. And we also changed the exercises. We have D2 students that are going into the clinic. And one of the things that we do is we actually start clinical experiences in their D2 year. And it starts as a half day, then to 1 day, then to 2 days, and eventually it goes up to full time, so that there's never a time where it's like a crescendo of clinical experience. So we have almost like a year-long pilot period before they're actually doing all of the work and being assessed on all of that work. And then once they're in that clinic, I loved your APPEs because we have a series of assessments that are actually competencies that have to be passed prior to them going to their community education rotation sites, which is our experiential learning out in the community, where they transition from our clinic here at school into community clinics. And so we actually approach it very similarly to how they do in pharmacology. But the bridge that we've started to use that helps facilitate this is actually the OSCEs. So our students have been in the clinic for about a year, and we found that there are certain things that we want to reinforce, or we need to actually test before they start doing certain procedures. And so we've actually built in OSCEs into some of our patient care so that we can blend the didactic and the clinical reinforcement of concepts. So Dr. Cohn, listening to you speak, I was like, wow, it's amazing how we're using different data, different contexts, different skill sets, right? But we're actually using very similar assessment to achieve the same level of learning. And to me, that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. For all the differences we have, it just shows that assessment is a process that can be laid over anybody, right? Like laid over any healthcare discipline, over any program to find out whether or not you're meeting your goals or need to engage in new initiatives. I really think it's cool the way you did that build up to a full day work week, right? We worry about that. Like they've been in class and now we're going to shove them out on 4-day work weeks. What are they going to be like, right? And that's where we see in pharmacy some of our professionalism stuff appear that we didn't have evidence for before. So you get a really good look at like, can they talk to a patient? And oh no, we need to pull back. And so, but then Catherine, you're doing it in remediation. So I'm sure those students are getting a really intense look at those areas that they need to improve on.
Let me address that really quickly. Because we're a competency-based curriculum, what we've done, and I think others may do something similar, but I think it's interesting, is that we have assessment, and then students not reaching competency on the assessment, they actually have to reassess. We give them a week period. We give them their strengths and weaknesses or opportunities back to them between the first assessment and the second assessment, and they have to re-examine or reassess. sorry about that, reassess if they didn't reach competency in that area. And then if they still haven't reached competency after reassessment, we actually do remediation. And finally, if we still don't have them where we think they need to be, we make them retake whatever that course was in the summer. It's a complete retake of the entire course. So essentially, we're trying to ensure by the time that they go out on their rotations, in addition to those appiness readiness exams, that they have the foundation such that they can then go into practice and practice fully.
Yeah. And so did you track all of that data? Like how many students you were remediating, how many exams you were giving, how much time faculty were spending? I think, and it's not because you worked in skills lab, Catherine, but I think the hardest working person in a school of pharmacy, often hidden, is the skills lab coordinator who is taking on these remediations for skills that students don't have, right? And we don't usually see all the hours they're spending in office with those students. So having that visibility in front of it probably helped to raise awareness of this is important for everybody to care about.
I'm laughing because there's two things related to that. One, I am just getting ready to hire a whole nother FTE for the skills lab. So, yes. And two, as I came into the curriculum for that entire first year, because we put like labs associated with every single class as well to make sure that that active learning was happening with the classroom itself. I helped to make sure that there was consistency between each class, sort of like in that skills lab way, to make sure that things were building properly. And so, yeah, I hear you. It's a lot of workload. It's a heavy lift, and you have to have the whole curriculum in your head in order to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And also another conversation for another time, but how much innovation can you shove into an OSCE? How many cool things can you do by designing an OSCE that deals with a special population or something, right? Just so many ways you can play with OSCEs. All right, so how did you gain faculty support, Erinne, for what you were doing with the curriculum?
I think the greatest or the best approach for faculty support is to use the curriculum to address their concerns and really get consensus and feedback. Having a top-down approach when you design a new curriculum, that is actually one of the challenges, right? Because there's a group of administrators that design a curriculum and then you carry it out, right? And that piece has to happen prior to anyone, like all of these faculty being hired. And so we are in a transition at KCU where, yeah, for the first year or so, you kind of had to go with the plan that was set out. And now we're in the process where at the end of each term, we're getting faculty feedback and we're allowing the curriculum to address some of those concerns so that we're all achieving the same goal. And I think the more feedback and input and support that you have, and voice from faculty, the more support that you're going to have from faculty. I will tell you one of the challenges, I think, in EdTech or in software is that we have to engage with a lot of software in health professions education today, whether it's your learning management system, your didactic assessment system, maybe that's an ExamSoft, maybe it's another program. Oftentimes you have another rubric system for what you're evaluating, either in your competency-based education or your EPAs in clinical settings. And that is a lot of technology for faculty. And so I think having a lot of consistent training and feedback and support so that if there is a challenge, it's addressed quickly. That's something I've learned along the way. And that's something that we've had to build because getting their feedback is great, but also you have to provide support because there's a ton of engagement with technology and that can be really beneficial. And it can also be frustrating because you're constantly learning new things every single day. And learning new things is challenging for everybody, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I could spend half of my job just training on ExamSoft when I worked in schools of pharmacy, right? Because it's such a heavy lift to ask faculty to not only just go in and create their questions, but now to tag them to all the areas of competence that as administrators we know are super, super important for accreditation, assessment, getting university buy-in for our initiatives, getting money. All right, let's be honest about it, getting those line items that we want. But then we put that burden on the faculty. So really listening to them and trying to solve for those things. And then Catherine, how about you? How did you get support?
Well, so I'm gonna kind of skip to like the curriculum committee that we have and how we evaluate a course, because I think that that speaks to that. So prior to a course being done, we evaluate the syllabus. And in the curriculum committee, the people that are the course coordinators come in and present their syllabus to the curriculum committee. We have discussions with the curriculum committee, who's made up of science as well as practice faculty, social behavioral administrative sciences as well, which kind of tend to make up a pharmacy school. And we have discussions if the course was given in the past, like what didn't go well, what did go well. Students are also on this committee. Like, what was the student perspective? What went well? What didn't go well? And then we make these recommendations to the course coordinators for corrections to their course as we move forward. And then we do the process again after the class is completed, after the course is completed. And we look again just to see what was the feedback from the students, what's the feedback from the course coordinators and the faculty who taught in the course, what did they think went well, what didn't go well. So that CQI process is very robust in that sense, and it just continues each time. And what I'm trying to do, because I think we used to do it for every single year, for every single course, is just to do like maybe first year, 1 year, and second year, the other year, so that it's just not overwhelming the committee. And we keep this this information from year to year to year to ensure that the issues that we had said the previous year actually were addressed, or if they continue to be an issue, we as a committee figure out like what do we need to do in order to make this successful.
I love that. I did the exact same thing, Catherine. Again, how we like do different things and then come to the same conclusion. My curricular revision at schools was also 1 year is P1, 1 year is P2, 1 year is P3, and then we do IPPs and APPs together, right? And in 4 years, we've covered the whole curriculum. We have a beautiful package to send to the curriculum committee, something like that. So how did you, I mean, did you get a lot of like, wait, I have to come and defend my syllabus? Did you get pushback in that regard? Are the students willing to be honest with faculty about what they saw in the course?
So we do have like student evaluation of teaching sets that come in, and I think that helps a lot. And then we also have our our students from the curriculum committee, we have them bring forward what the class says. And we also have something I didn't mention, town halls prior or directly after the first set of examinations, because we have examination periods like 3 times in a semester. We have a town hall where we go to the classroom with our academic affairs assessment and the dean of the College of Pharmacy. And we ask the students, like, what's going on? What's happening? What are your frustrations? What's going well? And they let us know. And so we also pull that piece in that way. And then the students on the curriculum committee are never put into a situation where they feel like they have to be in direct conflict with the faculty themselves. That being said, our students at our curriculum tend to be like pretty outspoken, so it's not really an issue. It's more like we have to kind of work with them to say, okay, tone that down a little. This is how you give feedback. So, I mean, I think you guys have all experienced that, so.
Yeah, I think my favorite email from a colleague back to a student once was, I'm so sorry, but your response to us was unprofessional. Please try again. Right? So it's redirected, but also allowed for an opportunity. So how about you, Erinne? Were there any particular areas of pushback that you kind of had to overcome?
I would say our main area of pushback right now is the time that it takes to complete our clinical assessment rubrics. And that is pretty common across, dental medicine, just in general, because our students are in that clinic starting their D2 year, and they are getting evaluated on procedures morning and afternoon every single day. And so that is a lot of feedback. However, part of this is providing them substantive feedback every single day so that they can progress across about 25 or 26 different skills, right? And many of which are surgical skills. And so I think that's been challenging. One of the ways that we've actually worked, we have a rubric software that feeds into Canvas, that feeds into Influx. So it doesn't go straight into Influx, but it goes there through our Canvas platform. And those rubrics are actually, the student pulls them up, self-assesses, sends that, routes it to the faculty member. The faculty member only has to make changes and then put in a qualitative comment if that's helpful or useful, and mark the level of supervision or independence they have on the Ottawa scale. And then that goes into a dashboard, and these students have like a global portfolio. So having the students having to fill that out, and then all the faculty has to do is review and find anything that was different on the self-evaluation or the self-assessment. I think that's helped combat that. But I will say that is still a new process. We're only in the second year of using that technology. And so every time we get all of our faculty trained, we hire a couple more faculty, which is great. We're a growing program, and then we get to start over again. So I will say, I think we're going to probably reach our height of faculty in our fourth year of our program. So we probably have 2 more what I call pilot years, where we just are constantly doing things new and we're continuing to build the team and build our process. But I think that's the biggest challenge, is if you evaluate 8 or 10 students morning and afternoon, you know, you are having to fill out those rubrics either sometime midday or right during the procedure or towards the end of the day. And navigating that administrative time and the administrative approach to that has been a challenge, but I think we're working through it slowly. And I think it'll work out here shortly.
That's really cool. That cognitive piece. Wow, that's awesome, right? Getting students to think about their own processes. Super cool. Dr. Cohn, we have a question real quick. How long did it take you to revise the curriculum? And then did you have any proposals or changes? I guess really what this question is asking is, how did you combat curricular hoarding? That article that came out a few years ago in AJPE, I think has entered all of our brains forever. Like, were there any areas where faculty were like, you cannot change this, this proposal cannot go through this way? And how did you handle that?
Yes. And we still have an issue with curricular hoarding, and the best way, yeah, we had done, prior to me coming to the college, they had done a first round of that, like where they looked at the curriculum and spent, I think, a year to a year and a half, like cutting pieces of it out. And when I got there, there were still things that we needed to take a look at. 2 things we did. One, because we became more integrated as we rolled out our new curriculum, there was more crosstalk between our science and our clinical faculty to see what parts are being repeated that don't need to be repeated. So we could cut some of those pieces out, because now they're happening within the same time period. So they're learning, you know, about pathophys, they're learning about micro, they're learning about the clinical pharmacology, the therapeutics, all of that within that same period of time, so that we can address that more easily. That's one thing. 2 is a little more sneaky, but what we do is we look to see how long they're actually teaching. We have 3-hour blocks for topics. So for the most part, our faculty come in and they're doing like a 3-hour block, of which we would like it to be 2 hours of didactic, sort of like learning in some way, shape, or form, and 1 hour more active type learning. So we pop in just to see, or ask students like, you know, when did they leave? Are they leaving early from the course? And that is a super easy way to determine which particular topics maybe just don't need as much time. And so then this coming year, we're actually going to assess that more thoroughly, and we're going to potentially sandwich some of our topics into 1 3-hour block. So yeah, especially in, there's one semester that we have that's the spring semester 2nd year, which is just overwhelmed. It's just too much stuff going on there. And so we're really going to focus in on that particular semester first, and then we'll go back and look at the other semesters. But I consider that a little more sneaky, because it's not going to really upset anybody, hopefully, because they weren't using that time anyway.
Right. And you're not looking to like catch them being bad from an HR perspective. You're just saying, hey, you don't need the time. You're leaving early. It's good. And then Dr. Kennedy, kind of a flip on that. How do you be a good defender of the curriculum and kind of push out and make sure that people aren't going to bring in their personal pet projects or stuff 10 pounds of flour into a 5-pound sack by growing their syllabus or adding content in or things like that?
Well, we actually have an audit and a review process. So the way that it works in our institution, since we're a new program, we have a curriculum management committee that does the review. But then when that course director, we call them course directors instead of course coordinators, when they come in and they get the edits from the previous year that went all the way through the CMC and the UCMC, and now they're recreating that syllabus. That is actually reviewed by our Office of Academic Affairs so that we have an eye on that. And we can say, hey, I know you want to teach this, but this is actually taught 2 other places. And this is redundant in a way that's actually not productive. And we're going to pull this out. We also may say like, hey, we understand we want to block. It has to at least cover this. So we need to make sure that all of these topics are included because of X, Y, and Z standards. So we have a pretty, I would say a tight review of the curriculum, and the Office of Academic Affairs actually approves the calendar. And so we may say you've asked for this, but this is what we have to offer because of X, Y, and Z. And so there's like I call it a give and take, but it's more of like an editing process. There's only so many hours in the day, and everyone wants more time for the area that they teach. And that's wonderful because your area is so important, right? And also there's only so many hours in a day, and we do need student wellness. And so we all have to give and take a little bit to make sure that all of our decisions are student focused. And so that's how we approach it in the College of Dental Medicine. I think in 2 more years, we are going to be doing exactly what Dr. Cohn's describing, where someone brings their syllabus and sends it to the Curriculum Management Committee. And then it goes through that entire life cycle and then the edits. But for right now, we have to have a little bit tighter approach to that since we're building a curriculum. And we go through an accreditation process that is actually a 3-part site visit. The initial accreditation, our mid-cycle visit, and then after we graduate our first class. And so because of that, that's how we approach and provide a little bit of pushback to make sure that we achieve and address every single topic that needs to be addressed in the curriculum, and we provide a sufficient amount of time for that.
Yeah, we in pharmacy, we call that like pre-candidate, candidate status, and then fully accredited status, right? So we have that 3 stage as well. And if you've been through those first two stages, like Dr. Kennedy is going through now, or I've gone through at a previous school, it is a lot of oversight. It really, really is. You are regularly communicating with your accreditors. They are kind of your buddies at that point until, you know, the full site visit comes and then you're back in that position. All right. So biggest wins. Unexpected roadblocks. I feel like we got to some of these, especially with the roadblocks, but if you have one big win each of you would like to, you know, kind of share with us, or a series of wins, that would be awesome. Yeah. We talk a lot about the challenges.
I will share with you my biggest win is it's 2 things, but it's the same. When I pull up influx, I have to report to our student progress committee each week on all the data, and I need to rank order all the students based on at risk, vulnerable, or, you know, green, go, doing fantastic. If you were doing this by paper, if you're using Excel for something like this, it takes you 2 weeks to get your report ready for the next one, right? And at the end of the day, it's still lagged because it's old data. I literally prep by clicking a button, pulling it up, and it's ready in real time. And all I do is go through student. So to me, that's a huge win. It saves people, which is hard to find, you know, in many universities. But in addition, it saves time. And I recently had to write an institutional effectiveness, like 3 or 4 pages for an accreditation document that is actually due this Friday. And so I did this 2 days ago before this webinar. And I pull it up and it took me about 90 minutes. If I didn't have the data, like, and was able to screen grab exactly what I needed, I think that report would have taken weeks. And so to me, that's a huge win to have real-time data that I can analyze, discuss, present at any given point in time in my program. And it's just, I don't think there's a bigger win than that.
Thank you. It's full and complete, right? And it's right there in front of your face. You're not backfilling. Catherine?
So one thing that you may not know about me is I'm actually in the process of getting another degree, a Doctor of Education degree, and I'm in my last year of it. It's a 3.5-year program, and my dissertation is on the competency-based curriculum, especially as it relates to students from underserved backgrounds. So are we improving our progression rates as it relates to students that come from underserved backgrounds? And so we just examined that first year, and it was dramatically successful in improving their progression. And so I'm super, super excited about that. And if you can't tell in my voice, I'm excited.
Yeah.
But and I can't wait to write about that as well and to publish on that. But I think that's our biggest win, is that it has been very, very successful. And that's wonderful for our students. It's wonderful for our program. And it's just something that I think is going to be interesting to see published as well, because it's
Oh my God.
competency-based education and progression rates. So
Yeah. And I mean, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So
yep.
like while you're helping those students who are underserved, your students who aren't underserved are also benefiting and probably seeing increases across their competence as well.
Yeah, and so and that's exactly the case, because it's anybody who's struggling, this type of curriculum brings up. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. Okay. And then you already talked a little, Aaron, about how NFLUX supported your changes or your assessment of change. So Catherine, I'll kind of lead this one to you if you have anything you want to add there. And then in general, how critical do you find EdTech solutions in supporting curriculum changes or the development of new academic programs?
So just yesterday, my data coordinator sent out copies of our latest, we have these, Aaron, I don't know if you know, but like in pharmacy, we have these graduating student surveys, and they ask questions about curriculum and those kinds of things. And maybe you guys do something similar, but we had our preceptor one come back yesterday. And so we just copied straight out from our Influx database. And it has the beautiful graphs. It looks at our peers. It looks at the national. It compares them. So we send that out to our experiential people as well as to our assessment committee, so that they can review and say, okay, well, these are the areas we're struggling. And it's so quick. It's so fast. And when we didn't have Influx, because in the past I've done that where we didn't have it, and it just takes a lot longer. You have to build your slides. You have to do all these extra things. And here it's just sort of like done. And I love that. So you can figure out what your issues are and address them quickly. You don't have to spend so much time just sort of spinning your wheels.
Yeah, those CQS surveys were the biggest win for me too, when I was just a user of NFLUX and not an employee of NFLUX, right? Aaron, if you don't know, they're standardized across the academy. We're required to send them out. They're used for comparison at the self-study and during the accreditation. It's actually a really, we're lucky in pharmacy to have that. A lot of other disciplines do not. But because we're required to do them, there is that pressure to answer to them all the time. And you could spend, I worked at a school where before I got there, they would spend an entire semester just on the CQS surveys, like doing statistical analysis. I'm like, guys, you're losing all the time to do something with the results, to make a measurable change for our people. Yeah. All right, Aaron, anything else?
All I was going to say is, where do I get those? But then I realized it's a pharmacy related component. I will also just add to that. I think what it's helping address. So in dentistry, in dental education, I don't know if it's similar in pharmacy or not, but there are about like 700 open positions across the country for faculty in dental schools. So we're constantly like recruiting and trying to get more people into dental education. It's something that we're approaching as a profession. And so one of the things that we have to think about is, how do we use EdTech to make it easier on faculty and allow the faculty that you have to have a broader reach and a more streamlined workflow. And so anytime we think about EdTech solutions, I'm thinking, how does this support my faculty? And does this replace an FTE, like someone crunching numbers for a whole semester, like the example that you gave, Megan? And so what I've noticed is that the EdTech solutions that we've like onboarded in the College of Dental Medicine not only do that, like they support student learning, which is fabulous, but then we also have all these solutions that make it easier for faculty, streamline their process, make life more efficient, maybe replace like a full FTE so that we can actually use technology to help reinforce some of our existing colleges. And to me, that is one thing that has been really, really, really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think you're right. There's so much that we're asking of our faculty. I had no idea that you guys had that problem in dental medicine, that you're unable to fill faculty roles. I don't think we have that same experience in pharmacy. Like a school might struggle to find a medicinal chemist, for example, but they're not struggling to find pharmacists who want to work in higher ed. So I think what you're speaking to is like they see it's easier for me to go over and be a dentist than it is to engage in education with students. It's a lot of lifting. And we want to make sure we answer those in the culture of our school. All right, and then how did you consider accreditation in your curricular decisions? Was it a side-by-side thing? Was it like, oh, we'll worry about it next year? How did you do that? Catherine, if you want to go first.
Okay, sure. How did we consider accreditation in our curricular decisions? So I'm not sure if this is exactly what this is getting at, but accreditation really makes a lot of our decisions for us in pharmacy because our standards are our competencies, right? So all of the educational competencies come from the accreditation standards. So everything leads back to that accreditation process. Mapping in our curriculum, all of it goes back to that. It goes back to the standards. We also have, Erinne, a Appendix 1, which is like a series of different topical areas that we sort of need to cover in our entire curriculum. And so we have to map back to those as well. So it's not just the educational competencies, it's that. And we also want to show something that Erinne was talking about, how you grow. We also want to show that we're developing over time through like Bloom's taxonomy, like we're moving from knowledge to application to that higher ordered thinking, which is something that's really important and near and dear to my heart. And that sort of spiraling on your curriculum as it goes all the way to your experiential education at the end. So our accreditation plays a huge role as far as what we teach and how we teach it. And I think now that in pharmacy, the EPAs are also coming out for the 2025 new standards, that's even going to be more so than it was before.
Those are called, if you don't know, they're called the COPA, C-O-E-P-A. So EPAs and competencies together create the COPA, and then they created, I believe, a toolkit, which they call the Copacabana. We have some real fun with our academy here.
That's amazing. Well, actually, accreditation influences dental education in the exact same way. And so it's really interesting to see more alignment. When we designed our curriculum, we actually used those standards, right, from our accreditor, and we did backwards design, which is also how we decluttered in a lot of ways. And then all of our assessments and rubrics are tagged to those standards, or those must statements. And so accreditation highly influences what we teach is a foundation. And then also there are certain things that are not yet included in our accreditation standards, but are best practice or common practice, right? And that could be something like new and innovative. And so those things are influenced in our curriculum, but we start out with those standards as like what we're aiming to is that goal in our backwards design and designing a new program. So I always think of accreditation as your framework. And then within that framework, how are you innovating and creating to foster student learning? And that's how we approached it at KCU.
That's fantastic. And if we have any physician assistant people with us, I just want to give a shout out to you. I'm hoping that you'll get with your accreditation standards to the place where dental medicine and pharmacy education are. We know that it's a big challenge, that they're not as clear in what they're asking for. And we have the luxury in pharmacy and the luxury, it sounds like in dental medicine, of having super clear, sometimes rather prescriptive standards for us to meet and hopefully exceed, right? They're the basic minimum to meet the accreditor standards, and we all want to be above what the basic minimum is for sure. Trade-offs or compromises? What trade-offs or compromises did you have to make, Erinne? We'll start here with you.
From a trade-off and compromise scenario, I think what we had to kind of compromise early on in the curriculum was how quickly we use the rubrics. We actually validated the set of rubrics that linked to our standards for about 2 years and published them before we started our curriculum. We went through a process. It was really interesting. We validated them just like they were surveys. It was cool. And then we started and we applied them. And now we still have to make edits to these rubrics. And so this first year, it's like we used them and then we switched over to a Canvas rubric while we had these like under construction, right? And then we flopped back and forth, and now we're coming back to these rubrics. And so in designing this, we had a direct observational style rubric for all of our clinical skills assessments that link to these standards. It's a fantastic framework, but what I will tell you, the first year where we had to compromise is we didn't get to use them as much, because we also didn't realize that like until they were in the environment with the students and the faculty were assessing the students, we weren't going to be able to validate them despite revising them for 2 years and having outside peer review from like 15 or 16 universities across the country.
Wow.
So we tried to peer review as much as we could and like pressure test them, but they couldn't be pressure tested until they were used on our students in our environment, either simulation or clinic. And so we're now onboarding them. We're revising them again this next semester. But I think that was a big compromise. I think we thought it was going to be just take off without a hitch, and it took off, but there was a hitch, and we had to make edits and have plan B and plan C in some scenarios. And I think that's one of the big compromises that we made. We're still on target for like achieving and using those. But it's been way more back and forth than I think anyone anticipated.
Awesome. Yeah. Being nimble is really important there, right? Changing quickly. Catherine?
So I'm gonna approach this by explaining, like, I don't know if people know about the Cynefin theory. Cynefin is like, takes like problems and puts it into quadrants. Simple problems where anybody can look at them and like go, oh yeah, we can just do this, right? There's more complicated problems where you have to have an expert come in and sort of advise. And then there's complex problems where people get involved, mostly. That's kind of where it comes. There's chaos as well. And in chaos, you just have to like, take control of the situation. But in the complex situation, you just have to be flexible. And it really has to do with when people get involved, when feelings get involved in a situation. And so whenever we notice that the changes that we're making, like people are getting something about it is triggering them in some way, shape, or form, we know we're in a complex area. And so rather than like have a prescriptive, like, we're going to do this giant change, we make tiny little steps instead, because people are more okay with a tiny little step, than they are with a giant step. And you just have to be okay with making that little step and then saying the next year we're going to make another step if that was successful. And if that's successful, we'll make another step. And you just keep at it to get to where you need to be. And you also have to be open-minded, knowing that it may not be the place that you thought it should be, but that's still okay. And yeah, you just have to be open to that and not to be like, it has to be this way.
Yeah, they're like professional quicksand, right? These areas where you're like, oh, I think we're going to get it through fine. And then you take one big step, and before you know it, you're sucked down into an argument, right? You've hurt somebody's feelings without intending to, and you didn't even know it was something that they felt strongly about, right? So pulling back and saying, all right, we're going to tiptoe across this area and make sure that we are managing expectations and feelings, and we're not, blowing people up, right? That's awesome. Yeah. I know, Erinne, if you're willing to share, you had a pretty cool story about tagging and how you managed to like make a trade-off there. I really liked that one.
Thank you, Megan, for the reminder. So if you have been in assessment for a while, one of the greatest areas of, I call them, I don't want to do this things for faculty, is tagging questions, because it's administrative, it's really challenging, it uses a lot of time clicking buttons, which is very frustrating for clinical faculty, particularly clinical dentists who want to be using their hands and like doing something clinically oriented. That's like their jam, right? So early on, a month in, I was like, oh, we are not going to be able to have faculty tag. This is just, it's beyond professional quicksand, except I wrote that down. I was like, we're not going to be able to do that. So I was interviewing a faculty member, and he's in private practice, but he was totally interested in integration. And he's like, I recently read this textbook. He brings me a textbook this thick on like medical dental integration. He's like, I thought this was interesting, so I just read it start to finish. And I was like, he likes thinking about integration. He's going to like tagging. And so I said, can I show you a really cool tool? I'm like, would you be interested in doing this? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I just want to come in 1 day a week. And he's like, I'll do anything you ask, but I want to learn about education. So he comes in every Friday which is one of our lighter curricular days. So there's not a lot of space for him to be in with students, right? And we hired this gentleman, this clinician, and he tags every single exam. Sometimes before the exam, sometimes after, it doesn't matter, but he's our tagging expert. So at the end of the day, our tagging is completely calibrated because I trained him, and now every single exam is tagged the same. So we're like internally validating ourselves, right? By like double checking on this. Course directors review it, but no one else has to tag it. And so he has actually been tagging every single assessment, ones that we use and one that's in our bank since we started. And it's been perfect. Like ideally, I wanted the faculty to do this when they put their questions in, but I realized that it just wasn't going to work. It was like sandpaper for their experience. And I didn't want it to be that abrasive. And so we ended up finding one person 1 day a week that does all of our tagging, and he does a bunch of other things too. But it's turned out to be seamless for the faculty, seamless for him because he loves it, and seamless for me because I have someone who's a clinical dentist that can really interpret every single question from a biomedical and sciences and a clinical perspective into our competencies and standards.
How cool is that? Right. Professional tagger, solve the problem, make the trade-off, faculty are happier, you get the answers that you need, and plus side, you don't have any professional disagreements or as many professional disagreements about the tag. He's arguing with himself, right? He's not arguing with 3 other coordinators. I thought that was a great story. All right, so ending with that, I want to open this up for all of you. If you have any questions, to put them in for our panelists. We talked about a lot today, but there might be something that we didn't cover. I know we had asked how long it took you to, did you answer that one? How long it took, Catherine, like from start to finish? Was it a year, 2 years?
So the hugest lift we did in 2.5 months, which
What?
was unheard of. And it was because we were told by our upper administration that you're going from a 4-year to a 3-year. And we found out like, 3 to 4 months prior to the next semester starting. So we
that's
we did it. I told you it was the fastest, yeah. That's why we had a consultant come in, because we knew like we didn't have time. So we did it like in a 2.5, the biggest lift was 2.5 months. Now that I said that, there's pieces that we continue to do all along the review process, and that will go on for years, and tweaking and changing a little bit. But the major overhaul we did like in less than 3 months. And it was
goodness.
Yeah, I know it's shocking. It was shocking to us, but we did it and we survived it. And
we say, we say higher ed moves like the Titanic, right? Like it doesn't move very quickly, but you guys moved at a lightning pace. That is amazing. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, the feedback I'm getting is that everybody loved this information. They're loving this panel. We seem to have covered all the content that people wanted to hear from us today, which awesome. We really got the full breadth and depth. If you have questions for either Dr. Kennedy, Catherine, or myself after this session, feel free to reach out to me. My email, if you don't know it, is megan@enflux. Just don't forget the extra A there. It throws everybody for a loop, but I think we even have it set that if you send it to the wrong Megan, it just goes to me because I'm the only one here. And I'll happily pass it along to our panelists. I want to thank them again for being here with us today. I couldn't even begin to, if I wrote it all down, like this has gone way better than I even would have expected. I can't even begin to express my thanks for you taking the time with your busy schedules and all you're doing in your curriculum and for your students and being with us here today. And we are going to send this recording out as soon as it renders and looks beautiful. We'll get it out to everybody who is here so that you can share it with more people at your institution or go back and listen to anything that they have to say.
Thanks so much, Megan. It was great to be here.
Yeah, love it.
Enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks all.